Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mike. How's it going?
It's pretty good. Who are we talking to today?
Today, we were talking to an electronic musician out of Dallas who goes by Andre the Brent, and he is the driving force behind the musical act known as Isopod. And he's a little older than us, not by much. So I imagine there's going to be a high overlap of gear and experience of musicians and things growing up. But there's going to be a lot of different stuff too. So I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, let's get into it.
Mike's on mics. Yeah.
Hey, Andre, I am Mike Nimmix.
And I'm Mike Dow.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Mike. Thanks so much for including me in what you do.
Well, I think this is going to be great. So
Yeah, we appreciate you coming and doing this thing. How did it all begin? Where exactly, when did the music find you, or did you find it?
Oh man, that's a question. Well, it's set the way back clock to the 70s. When I was 2 weeks old, I had the colic, and I wouldn't. Mozart was the only thing that would make me shut up. And my
Good
dad
taste.
had my dad had a Mozart record, or he didn't have one, so he put it on reel to reel. So I grew up with reel to reels, and I found out later it's so that I wouldn't destroy the vinyl records. And he later bequeathed that vinyl collection to me, but I listened to music on tape at first. And Mozart piano concertos were my comfort. And my mother noticed that I really perked up when Mozart was playing. So that was an indication to her that I should probably get piano lessons.
Oh, and so you took the piano lessons and I don't know about you, but for me, they were kind of torture. What was it like for you?
For me, my position at the piano was usually under the bench, on my back, with my legs kicking in the air.
That feels right.
I did piano lessons under protest.
that seems to be a common theme.
Yeah.
So how long did you last?
Well, my mom said, "You're doing this for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
You're going to do this for 5 years, and then you can quit if you want." Yeah, it was kind of torturous, but I had a good teacher, and I'm still in contact with her to this day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm very thankful to her. I owe what I do to a lot of great teachers. I had good mentors.
So after the 5 years, did you quit and move in a different direction?
I did. I got the participation trophy, and then I quit for a year, and I thought, hey, wait a minute, I need this. So I took another 5 years.
Wow.
And,
Okay.
And
yeah,
how old were you at that point?
I was probably around 14, 15 years old. And
Okay.
so I did this. I did my second run of piano lessons in college. I was homeschooled for a while because I would sit in grade school and look out the window and dream about Kermit the Frog. And I brought all my schoolwork home along with my homework. So my mom decided to let me do what I wanted to do, which was to make films. So I made Super 8 films when I was in grade school. And my venue for that was my dad's annual Christmas party. And we would do Super 8 films, and we would perform the soundtrack live for that.
Whoa.
We had reel-to-reels with music cues and sound effects, and then we get on microphones and do all the dialogue, lip syncing to the film.
And how old are you when you're doing this?
8, 9, 10 years old. Yeah, we did that for about 3 or 4 years.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and eventually the synthesizers came into that.
Oh, yeah.
It took a while. Did you ever see an MG1 at Radio Shack? You remember those things? The realistic synthesizer? This one was built by Moog for Radio Shack. So
no.
it's a Moog one.
The concert
Yeah.
mate?
Yes. It had several different names, but yeah. I begged my dad for that thing.
I don't think I've ever seen that with a realistic, branding, but that would blow my mind.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was something. I begged for that, and he wouldn't buy it for me because it was $400.
Oh, dang.
And at the time in 1982, that was a lot of money.
That was a lot of money.
Yeah. A year later, one of those Univox mini Korgs showed up. I guess he found one at a garage sale for $15. I'd say that was more of an appropriate price. And,
So that was your first synth? Was the Univox?
that was the first synth that I played. The MG1 was the first synth that I touched. Didn't get to use it. The Univox was the first synth that I played. I didn't own it, but it was at my father's place of business, and he had a Bill Putnam styled recording studio built in his place because he was an audiovisual director. So it was really cool. They had a control room, and then they had glass, and then there was a main room out there. He took the double pane glass out because he used slide projectors. You couldn't have double glass, but it was still pretty cool. So he had a bunch of Revoxes that he'd purchased in 1971. I got one of, I think, 11 that he purchased for the department. He had Revoxes in the control room with control lines up to the classrooms, and they had a control panel with buttons on it that you would push to play the tapes. And of course, it would never work. So you had a telephone on the podium as well. And so you'd call down, and then you'd call down to the operator, and the operator was down there where the patch bay was, and he would have to go thread the tape and make sure that it was playing for the instructors. Kind of my dad's fault that I'm into technology, and it's my mom's fault that I'm into music.
All right. I feel like we've skipped something, or I zoned out. So your dad was an instructor or on staff at some university somewhere?
Yeah. He taught at a preacher school.
Okay.
Yeah, I come from a long line of artists and preachers, and preaching just didn't suit my dad well, so he ended up in the audiovisual department, which was perfect for him.
And where was this?
This is in Dallas. He's a DTS professor. He's about to retire right now, but he's been there since before I was born. Time. Yeah, pretty much. I still remember the smell of that building he'd take me in.
Right.
That studio was in the basement, and it was kind of a murky smell, and I remember things like the sun-kissed machine down there getting popped for 5 cents. We had this camera, which we'll get into a little bit later. This Newark camera. It took up 2 whole rooms. It was a bellows camera. You'd have to go into a little room and turn on a red light to expose the film. You were inside the camera. It was nuts. I'm
so jealous right now because I had an 8mm film camera to play with, but never would my parents ever buy me the film to actually, use it. And of course, I didn't have any money to buy film. So I just had this thing, and I could put batteries in it and listen to it and I could pretend until, VHS came along. But gosh, the Super 8 would have been the bee's knees.
Well, a lot of us had to wait for digital to start really taking pictures.
Sure.
And it was 2005 when I really started, because I would shoot film. I'd get some film, but then I'd be too cheap to take it to the lab and have it developed.
Right.
So I got film everywhere that I've never seen.
Right.
Every once in a while, I'll find one in the fridge.
That is true. Before digital, there were really 2 phases to photography, which was one, setting up and snapping the shot and, advancing the reel. And then the other one was the lab and development, whether you're doing that yourself or taking it to the 1-hour photo or a Wolf Lab or something like that. And, we all know that you go on vacation and you get back and they say, have you developed your pictures yet? I want to see them. Let me know when you get them in a couple weeks.
Yeah. You'd have these awful slideshows after people's vacations.
Yeah, you're walking around with prints.
Yeah, please don't use all 80 slots of the carousel. We don't want to sit through all of that.
and with prints, please don't grab them with your fingers.
Right.
That's funny.
Well, it sounds a lot like this is something that I don't think we've touched on yet, and I'm just assuming that it was kind of true for the other mic, is that there was always something throughout grade school. Whenever they would wheel out the AV cart or the little projector or overhead or whatever, something about audiovisual that I was always attracted to. I was like, oh, this thing again. Gosh, I really want to be part of that. Like,
raise your hand if you always volunteered to run the slide projector, the strip projector, or the actual film projector. Yeah, we all did that.
And I don't
film strips.
Yeah, the film strips, exactly.
Yeah, the film strips, the current events, or where it is a tape playing and it goes beep and you advance it one slide.
Or the sound of somebody hitting a wine glass with that spoon.
There you go.
Just really jarring sound that would make you jump every time you heard it.
Yeah, but I don't think we've touched on. Have we talked about that or brought that up before, Mike? Like, just the idea that we all kind of were drawn towards it.
Well, think of it this way: that was high tech at the time.
Yeah.
That was the the low tech was the overhead projector and the chalkboard. These were high tech. And then when TVs and VCRs came out, we naturally had an affinity for, oh, this is really cool. And we've, and then the music world with you can start with the Revox reel-to-reels and, and then go up to today to a DAW or whatever you want to use. So I'm getting a little weary of keeping up with tech because it's just, I've gotten a little stubborn in some of my things where I'm like, this works for me. I understand it to a great depth, and I'm not interested in always having the latest and greatest on everything.
Right.
But that's a perfectly valid way to use a software pack. One reason I'm a Logic geezer is that you can use it as shallow or as deep as you want.
Well, you've jumped into the next question I was going to ask. What is your software of choice?
Well, I am currently a Logic guy, but I'll show you what I started with.
Ooh.
My first sequencer was this. This is Deluxe Music Construction Set for the 6800 processor Mac.
Oh,
Okay.
cool.
It's a port from Amiga, but I think the software started its life as a Commodore 64 program. This was a digital score piece of software that you would program with the mouse. My first computer music was done with the mouse only.
Wow.
And at the time,
Is that 1985, 86-ish?
Yeah, 86, I think, is when we started doing that. And
Okay.
it was actually pre-MIDI software, and MIDI was added to the back end of it later. I used to use just the Mac itself, rewinding to the Nuart camera. That was our graphics. We did manual paste up, and we did graphics. And I'll show you, my first cassette was done with that Nuart camera. Black and white cassette. This is a combination of analog and digital technologies. So this was a 35 millimeter camera. This seems like it's really random, but I'm on the spectrum, and this is perfectly logical to me.
It makes plenty of sense to me.
To me, this is linear. We're just going back to 1979 instead of 86. So back in 79, we used this camera. So we took a photograph, and then this typography here was done on the Macintosh computer when that showed up.
Sure.
We had a Nuart camera. We had a $20,000 mainframe that did basically Microsoft Paint, and it had a film recorder on it. And then we had the Mac, which was doing the desktop publishing, and we were using laser printer. So this was laser printed, pasted onto the photograph, and then this was put into the Nuart camera and on the Platen with some film, and we combined the digital artwork and the analog artwork using this high contrast Codolith, basically PMT print film. And it was, legal sized. It was big. And it used a suction platen. So you would turn on a vacuum cleaner to keep the film on the platter, and then you put it up like this, and then you'd open the aperture for about 20 seconds, and you'd have these huge halogen lights in the other room on the bellows.
That's awesome.
So you would actually focus it before you put the film in, and then you would expose the film, and then you'd have to go use the chemicals to develop that. And this ended up on a Xerox machine, and this was our first cassette.
Sure.
Yeah, my previous moniker before I was Isopod. That was my first release.
So using the Mac and the photograph, you got camera ready art for the larger camera.
And what year was it when you were handing out those cassettes?
This was 91.
91. Okay.
Yeah, so we're jumping around a little bit, but in 1986, I was using this piece of software on the Mac, and my dad was using the Mac for the desktop publishing, and he was learning that, and he was learning how to do vector graphics. He was using Aldus Freehand, which got displaced by what is the Illustrator people use now.
Sure. Yeah.
And then we got into Photoshop. So those worlds were separate for me for quite a while. But there was the filmmaking, there was the photography, and then there was the digital music and the analog music. So I would record that Univox onto cassettes and just play around and make robot noises. so I did that, but eventually a 4-track reel-to-reel showed up in the studio, and I did a sort of Jean-Jacques Perry style soundtrack to one of my claymation films. And that
Awesome.
was 84, I think that happened. But by 86, the Mac was on the scene, and I was actually, you know, programming with a mouse, and I wasn't having to play things by hand anymore. And then in 87, a DX7 showed up under the Christmas tree. So yeah, we wanted to be digital. At the time, there was, you know, we had a lot of analog stuff going on, but the setup was hybrid at this point. Very strange mix of
You're like
technology.
the luckiest kid.
So was the DX7 your first synth that, you know, lived in your bedroom and you were allowed to touch at will?
Yeah, that's the first synthesizer that I owned. I had borrowed a Juno 106 from my choir director.
Nice.
And that showed up on the 4-track. In fact, I'm resurrecting some of those tapes to play the Vintage Computer Festival in June. I'm gonna showcase some of my first computer music compositions, and that was realized with the Juno 106, and I think a Casio that I borrowed from somebody. My choir director got me into MIDI. He put a MIDI cable between this big gray Emax sampler and his Juno 106. These two big gray monolith things showed up at choir practice one day, and he had a Mac, and he pushed the mouse button, and this entire composition came out of it. And that was, I think, 1986. I knew what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Like, I want to do that.
This is choir for high school or choir for church, or
I did both, but yeah, this was a church choir.
church
And,
choir. Man, I was
yeah.
in the wrong church.
Well, we got kind of lucky. We had an old vaudeville guy who used to do puppet shows and you know, slapstick piano and stuff for us. And then Bob came along, Bob Singleton. He was musical director for this show called Barney and Friends. And so that
Yeah.
big gray Emax, it looked like, you know, the one that Depeche Mode used on their Music for the Masses tour. That thing, the one that you stuck floppy
Emax
disks
2,
into.
Emax 1. I think it was Emax
Yeah.
2.
This was an Emax 1 upgraded to SE.
Okay. So the mid-range.
Mhm. This one had the analog filters on it, but no SCSI. So, you know, but I did have sound tools, which you could port samples into over an RS-422, which took forever. A snare hit would take 2 hours.
Yeah.
You'd literally go, I mean, not even drink a cup of coffee. You'd go bake a cake,
Yeah.
and you come back, and your snare would be inside the Mac, and then you could like truncate it.
We talked
nothing
about
else.
that in
Yeah.
SoundForge had the same thing, but you could do it over MIDI. You could actually transport a
Samples.
sample over MIDI, but it was
That's
still
cool.
it was the same. It would like 3 hours later, and if either one of them hiccuped, then you had to start over. And it was ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of failures at that time. I mean, when CDs came out,
You'd have to press a benign button or key on one or both sides, or else they would go into sleep mode, like, oh, you're not using me, so I'm disabling something here. And you're going, no, I'm loading a sample. What the
Yeah.
hell?
yes, that's called the handshaking,
Yeah.
digital handshaking.
Yeah.
One of my favorite memes I saw the other day was like, you know, Sistine Chapel, God reaching out, but instead of Adam, there's this cat, and he's getting ready to whap God's finger. I thought, that's my sense of humor. Well, I think there's
that
a
is
cat
not
back
the
there.
sin to my act.
Right.
That is
into my act.
That is a nerd joke right there. Thanks,
Is that
Mike.
a Miniac? This into my
Yes.
act? Yes. The Miniac
Wow.
was a good synth.
I don't even know what that is. I've never heard of one.
Miniac was an Akai virtual analog synthesizer that was pretty small. I think it had a 37-note keyboard. It came out in like early 2000s, I think.
Okay.
It was the successor to the Ion, if you remember that thing, which was brilliant. It was a brilliant synthesizer.
I know some synthesizers, but there were so many. There are so many out there that it's. I was more mainstream kind of producer, recording engineer, and so I know a couple of the things that everybody else knows, but yeah, that is that's some niche stuff that is beyond me. But I'm glad you know it.
The Miniac, it had a mic, didn't it? I mean, it's kind of like today's Mini Freak, the Arturia, but it in a visual sense. But am I thinking of the right thing or no?
Yep. It had a detachable gooseneck vocoder mic. The vocoder was pretty good, and it had a third modulation wheel.
And what was that for? Just whatever you assigned?
Whatever, yeah, it was freely assignable.
Okay.
And that thing was cool. It had Prophet 5, JP8 filters. It had everything. It was fully modular, actually.
Who made the Ion?
That was Elise's.
Oh, not Akai. Okay.
Yeah, but I think some of the Elise's people worked on the Akai.
Got it. Okay.
Kind of like, Dave Smith worked on the Wave Station. Yada yada, but Elise's probably had a lot to do with why I was able to produce at home. This was my second sequencer. My second sequencer, actually, it was hardware.
Yeah.
So
We've seen one of those before.
I had this in the companion HR16, and then the little Microverb 2 showed up, and I loved the gated reverb settings for that. I always put that on the snare drum.
Yeah.
Gave it its own output.
No, I've used that little Microverb gated. That was the one. Yes, that was the one that was like, this one's good. Yeah, let's use this one. Yeah. Yeah,
the 1 or the 2 just kind of depended on what the 1 was the gnarly one. I love that. Yep. It was the Phil Collins.
Yep.
Kind of sound. Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit. Did you get into any kind of groups in high school, junior high, anything like that?
Well, my younger brother and I would sort of compete with each other on stuff. So we were making cartoon strips about being abducted by aliens. So we had our own aliens, which were named our first names backwards.
Sure.
So my monster was named Tenerb, and he'd come from space and abduct us and stuff like that. And so the synthesizers would get used as, the residual sound of the planet's atmosphere or something like that. A lot of Star Trek type stuff ended up in our recordings. We did radio dramas at first. Before we could play instruments, we did character voices and did radio dramas. My brother was always around, and he was always better at everything that I did, but he didn't care. He didn't care. He would try it, and he was like, "Oh, I'm on to something else.
Yeah,
I'm into my literature, or I am now focused on the specter of world government, that kind of thing." Yeah, I was the weird one who would be more likely to start a cult or join one.
It's a fine line.
Is that what it says in your high school yearbook? Most likely to A or B.
Start a cult / or join one.
Yeah. I just wanted to belong back then. I wanted people to like my Chili Bowl haircut. Until I put on Robert Smith makeup once, and he wanted to disown me. He's like, I'm not putting on.
Yeah, I saw some video of you performing on YouTube, and I said, this is what it would probably look like if Flock of Seagulls and The Cure had a baby. I was like, there he is, man. It's right there.
Yeah, I just recently learned that Echo and the Bunnymen. I was always trying to figure out which one. Okay, so I know the Bunnymen is probably the band. Which one is Echo? Echo was the drum machine. It was their drum machine.
I thought it was Danny Elfman.
He wasn't Echo. He was Elfman. But the Echo was actually an EKO computer rhythm.
And then he went on to score Spider-Man.
Elfman is just, mad respect for that guy.
He's got a pretty cool career.
I know I should probably like more people, but I think he's probably the first one besides John Williams that I bought a CD of. Mm-hmm. And the one that it was really popular at the time.
Batman.
No, it wasn't Batman that did it for me. It was Beetlejuice. I love the Beetlejuice. The low piano, dun, 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 that whole thing is just.
He's got that Tim Burton genre down.
Yes.
Which is why Tim Burton says, I'm doing a new film. Are you ready?
Yes.
Right. Speaking of CDs, do you remember these things?
Oh, yeah. The boxes.
Yeah. I mean, people were afraid that nobody would look at the CDs because they weren't as big as the records. So these went into the same bins. CDs got their own bins eventually, but they went into 12-inch bins. And so
I forgot
these are
about
some of
that.
the things I bought. Tour de France.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
Kraftwerk?
of course, Kraftwerk did it. This is the John Tesh version. Kraftwerk couldn't do it every year. I wish they had. Got Pet Shop Boys.
Ooh,
This was
discography.
I think
Innocence.
this is the second CD I ever bought. So this is the kind of stuff that was in my CD changer.
There you go.
About the time I was learning computers and music.
Now, see, I kept the boxes, except I split them open and flattened them out because then it was a square, and they
Oh,
were
cool.
perfect. They were perfect wall art, like
Not
a
thought of
poster
that.
or the billboard. Yeah.
Huh, very cool.
So who else influenced you beyond what you've shown us?
Yeah. What else was in the vinyl collection other than Mozart?
My parents they kind of skipped over the 60s. So our culture is kind of from 200 years ago. So I don't think my parents could name the 4 Beatles. But I got my Beatles through some records by the head of the BBC, Ronnie Aldrich. He had this dueling pianos thing that he would do with full orchestra. So that's how I got my Beatles tunes. We had a bunch of those records. And then the Mystic Moods, which was like, cricket sounds and race cars and orchestra music, stuff like that. Elevator music, 70s elevator music. That was actually good stuff. And we had some library music too. That's when I learned about samplers. My dad came home with a cassette sampler for APM Bruton Music, which was a British outfit, but it was full of music from the Fairlight CMI, and that sound had as big an impact on me as the early Moog records that I heard. So yeah, but to answer your question, my influences were Walter Carlos, Wendy Carlos, Tron soundtrack. Yeah. But we had the original switched on box, and then some other things too that some imitative records by a few other people. We had this strange record called The Happy Moog by Jean-Jacques Perrey and Harry Breuer. You remember Harry Breuer? Do you remember the Mallet Mischief record?
I'm not familiar with that.
It's one of those space age bachelor pad records from like '62, with Esquivel and all that stuff, that whole scene. Harry Breuer was like a mallet guy, and he had this lady clutching a string of pearls, like in this revealing dress, lying on top of a set of Vibes or something like that. It's one of those record covers that people recognize, like the whipped cream thing.
Yes.
But that guy collaborated with Jean-Jacques Perrey on the first Moog prototype, or I think his system was number 2. System number 2. It was the same system that ended up on all that stuff on Sesame Street. But Jean-Jacques Perrey was my childhood hero. He did this thing called the Happy Moog, and it was a ragtime record for kids with animal sounds. So he was going out with a Nagra and sampling animals and stuff, but he would spice it up. And he was a student of Pierre Henry, who was really angry at him because Jean-Jacques wanted to do funny things. Yeah, he was serious. He was serious tape music, but Jean-Jacques Perrey wanted to make funny music. And I think we all know who won that fight. This record wouldn't be around without Jean-Jacques Perrey, in my opinion.
So yeah. You brought up a Nagra, and the first time I'd ever heard of one of those was going to film school, and I actually got to use one. And then later on, I find out, I'm watching some sort of Star Wars something, and I see that Skywalker sound, that's what they were using. And I was like, oh, and I remember thinking when I first used it, boy, this is real old. And then I remember using it thinking, this actually sounds really good. And then I found out that like the preamps in it were made by Rupert Neve, and it's just like, oh, okay, this is for real serious. This is good stuff.
Absolutely, lovely machines. Yeah, great for spies too. Yeah. They had the little tiny version. You could.
That's what Ben Burt would walk around with and get sounds for Star Wars.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, another Star Wars machine. This one back here. TX 3340S. It was one of the Simulsync machines. Like
Oh, no.
76 or so. That the first Star Wars movie was done on 4 tracks on a machine like that.
Okay.
You can imagine bouncing everything
Did
down
I?
to 4 tracks.
That's crazy. I saw one of the prints where I did I see that? Apparently the first release had sounds missing. And they had to go
Wow.
back and, you know, redo it and put the sounds in for the, you know, while it was being circulated. Just because it was such a time crunch to get that done.
Huh.
But
That's insane.
I watched the film recently, and I could, on the first Star Wars, you can hear the wow and flutter on the tape machine.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that going back and knowing they used that machine, I was like, oh, I bet this sounds like a Tascam. So I listened to it. Yep, there it is. That's the Tascam sound, that mid-fi sound.
I hear a lot of things now that whenever I was a kid, I didn't notice. But yeah, those little things, they do kind of come through. I was listening to, do you like Pina Colada's song that, you know?
Oh yeah. Is that a yacht rock song?
Yeah, so if you listen to it real close, you can actually hear what I'm pretty sure is just tape bleed through, like the print through that happens when you leave tape too close together for too long, because you can hear his vocal almost a whole measure before, and it's not in time or anything, like, you know, it's not like they did it on purpose, but if you listen real close where there's not supposed to be a vocal way down, you can kind of hear that lead vocal kind of creep through, and I'm almost sure that's what's going on there.
Yep, the
That's
tape
so
op didn't
funny.
do his job. He stored it heads out.
Yeah, exactly.
Or it was on a small hub.
Right.
That also contributes to some more bleed through. I was one of the last tape ops. So in fact, that's an album title.
That's a great album.
Yeah, I know.
Title.
Last of the
last
tape ops.
op.
Yeah, it's so much knowledge to have that feels so obsolete, but it turns out that it's actually very useful to have for creating or for bringing back and archiving all the old stuff.
Yeah, archiving is pretty fun, or not.
Well, we've been through, Mike Nimitz and I, he's got a bunch of VHS, and I said, well, you know, you might want to bake those tapes first. And he was like, what is that? And so we've got a beef jerky machine now, and we hand it back and forth. So a lot of that.
Cooking the sticky shed.
Yeah. Definitely. And I didn't have a problem with anything that was ever baked. So
that's not hard to do, really. I mean, you're scared to do it the first time, but you know,
it's a little weird, especially given the terminology. You're like, you're gonna do what? Because growing up in Texas, what I remember was somebody left my really awesome mixtape on the back dash of my car in July, and I came back and it
melted.
Was a different shape.
Yes.
And I was not happy about that. To me, you know, that's baking a tape. I'm like, no. We'll see what happens. What did you do after high school? I want to know what happened between high school and Isopod.
Yeah, how did you come to be?
Before there was Isopod, there was the spherical aberration. And so my musical partner got married and did all that responsible stuff. So for about 8 years, I kind of spun my wheels, not really knowing how to perform electronic music. So in the 90s, I kind of did a lot of college myself too. I was studying composition, piano performance, music industry studies, stuff
and
like that.
Where did you go?
Where did I not go? I think I went to 9 different colleges.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I spent some time in North Texas doing composition. A lot of it was a blur. I tried so many different things. I spent a lot of time at the Dallas Community College District. They had some really good teachers there at the time. They prepared me with music theory so well that I got to North Texas and was bored.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they gave me some like postgraduate level studies, and I didn't know it. They really prepared me well. So that's why I say I can't say I'm a self-made person at all. I had really good teachers. I wouldn't be doing this well without a knowledge of music theory, because then my music would be boring. It wouldn't go anywhere. That's why I always thought progressive techno was a funny word, because it's like, well, they call it progressive music and it doesn't go anywhere. I mean, prog rock went more places than this does. And then I realized, oh, progressive meant you're muting things, bringing it in and out. But that's because of the Moog 960, because it only had, 8 stages, shift registers. That was analog sequencing. That's what gave us the style. But I didn't know that at the time, because my first sequencer was a Macintosh computer, so I thought I could do anything. And I learned about the analog purist stuff later, because I had a few things. I mean, I had this Moog Prodigy that I found at a flea market, and it was an impulse purchase I made. I played a little Bach on it and put it away in the closet for a few years until the year 2000. I went to this club and saw this band called Joy Electric, and they had, I think, an SH1, and a punk drummer and a DAT machine. And they were doing these full electronic arrangements with just a monosynth and a drum kit and a microphone. And I realized, oh, this is practical. This is how I can make electronic music.
That's right.
Like the post-punk way. So I started listening to early Human League and stuff like that. Visage. I loved that stuff. I was kind of a new romantics guy. I liked Gary Newman and Japan.
I like to think of that stuff as simple yet very effective.
Yeah, that was the stuff that I kind of turned to after I felt electronica had run its course. I really liked Underworld and Orbital and stuff like that. But after that, I was like, well, what can I do that would be new? It's like, well, there's really nowhere to go after this, because we have people like, writing music in code. I was at North Texas and people were using Cycling 74 to write compositions without hearing them, which I thought was nuts. But now you can do a lot of that in real time. But I thought, where can we go? I mean, we can do interactive video, we can do projection mapping. Now everyone's using Touch Designer. Everyone's doing like interactive stuff in Touch Designer. I need to play with that a little bit. But I'm just there's kind of a cranky Luddite in me that just kind of wants to do things the old way. I'm a keyboard player. I want to touch something on an instrument and it makes a sound, and then I create from that. I don't want to dive into submenus.
Well, it's a different, we've talked about this before. It feels like a different part of your brain whenever you start. When you're creating, you're over here, but the moment that you have to be an audio engineer, it pulls you away from the creation process. And it's hard to get back to the zone or whatever you want to call it. And I haven't found a piece of software yet that has married those two and made them kind of work together, where I can flow between these two jobs and not have it. Yeah. Because it's usually, why am I not making sound again? Oh, okay. Oh, because of all, okay, and then half an hour later, what was the idea that I wanted?
Yeah, there's a great workshop from Mark Verbus that's a few years old now, but I think it came from 2017 or so. I mean, he just said interface is everything. You look at his modules and they just make sense. Oh. I played the Roland 500 series modules when they came out. I thought the cables were a little too close to the sliders, and then I went over to the next booth and there was make noise, and like everything was ergonomically perfect. It's like I hated Eurorack when it came out. I just thought it was too small. I have fat fingers. But when I played Make Noise, it made sense. Even though the signal flow made sense. They're kind of, I don't know, they're kind of Buchla inspired. As a company, I like their stuff a lot. I wouldn't mind owning a black and gold shared system. Anyone want to share something like that with me?
Yeah, if one showed up, I wouldn't turn it down.
Right.
I always felt the same way, kind of with the sequencers and the older Roland stuff had its own way of doing things, interface. And then you'd move over to something like a Akai or a Alesis or Kurzweil or something like that, and theirs always seemed way more clunky to me. But those, I've only been able to play with the big name brand stuff, the Korgs and the Alesises and the Rolands, and Roland always felt pretty easy to use and sort of lent itself to to create. And Mike and I have talked about this, that I still, if I really had my way, I'd still be sequencing with a little MC300 because it just felt solid and it felt like everything that I did was great. Whereas I can get lost in a computer program, you know?
Yeah, that MC series was really cool. Well, here's my Desert Island drum machine from that era.
Yeah.
This is the one. If I could only have one, I would have this. This is what I imagine, if Kraftwerk had made another record, it would sound like this. It's just there's something very crowdy about it, something very electro about it. And
Yeah.
it's a synthesizer.
Sure.
You're synthesizing the sounds on it. It has a few samples, and somebody's got a tutorial on how to replace the samples in there. But you got to, you risk frying the unit.
Sure.
I'm not a big fan of mods anymore.
It's awesome to have the YouTubes at our fingertips where somebody else has already fried units and they've figured it out for you. And all you have to do is just kind of follow along.
YouTube is good for that. I miss the early YouTube days before the algorithm would bury you. I mean, you could post something on your website and it would be on first page of Google. Yeah. But before that, it was BBSs, chat rooms.
Right. Yeah. We've all been
Prodigy.
There. Dial up and wait 3 days to download something.
Yep.
My Prodigy username was KNCF08C.
I could not tell you any of my usernames.
I succumbed to the AOL tin. The tin that the disc came in. I had a few of those. I was Cyber Nigel.
There you go. No, I had AOL, and after that, the Prodigy was my dad's. That's why I was C. He was A, KNCF08A, and my brother was KNCF08B. So I was KNCF08C. And I was like, okay, that was interesting. But that was the first time we talked about this kind of before where, well, you're in Dallas, so you know what Bill's is.
Mm-hmm.
You had to find your specialty record store. Yes, Bill's a specialty record store, but not all specialty record stores are Bill's.
Exactly. Yeah.
But when I getting on those early BBSs, that's where I started finding information about bands I was into, which were not mainstream, and anything from, oh, here's where the band is from, and these two were childhood friends, and here's the kind of synthesizer they used on this track, and you're going, wow, that's awesome. I want one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Don't even know what it looks like.
Do you remember the synth pop web ring?
No, I don't remember a lot of what I was on there for. When I was getting on there, my main bands at the time were kind of like Depeche Mode, New Order, Pet Shop Boys, Cure, Erasure, Yaz, that Brit pop. The Cure is a little on the edge of that, but still. And so, and I was all into what kind of gear do they have? How are they doing this? Because I go, oh, yeah, I want a synthesizer. Well, we go down to Radio Shack, and I'm like, this is a piece of crap. This doesn't sound like anything. It doesn't do anything. And the sales guy's all like, oh, yeah, you can record stuff right here. My dad's like, see? And I'm like, no, you can't really do what I'm wanting to do. And it was just annoying.
That sound. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then it was, oh, well, you find out, okay, they're using a mini mode. Great. You go down to Montgomery Ward's and say, I need a mini Moog, and they don't know what the hell you're talking about.
It was a tough sell to get Radio Shack to carry Moog products in the day, but I still remember seeing the Moog Source at Radio Shack. That was something. I eventually got one of those, and it's kind of one of my main axes.
I guess when we talk to some people in England, I want to know, what is the deal with the English music stores? Why do they only carry awesome stuff? I mean, I honestly don't know where I could have bought something like that in DFW in the 80s or 90s.
This is how the British got us back.
Right.
For chasing the redcoats.
Yeah,
away.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll take all the American-made gear and sell it over here, but not let them sell it and back home.
So you got hip hop. You got Rapper's Delight, but we're gonna give you UK grime.
Yeah, and we'll give you the
Mhm.
keyboard that has reggae, salsa, and all those Latin beats on it. So don't worry, you'll be fine.
Here's a keyboard that has 2 cumbias.
Well, you see the thing with getting a little off topic here, but with Gorillaz and Clint Eastwood, where they use the preset beat off the Omnichord for that song. That song is total presets off the Omnichord, even the drum fill. And you're going, you got to be kidding me, dude. And they kind of did it as a joke, and it took off. And they're going, okay, whatever.
I don't know. Looking back on Casio's history, I think what they did was remarkable. Sure, I mean they came in cheap plastic cases, but yeah, I mean,
they have either or are about to re-release the Omnichord.
Huh.
I am eagerly awaiting that.
I'm curious what. I'm sure everything that it did will be there. I'm curious what it will do beyond.
Yeah, I'm curious how close. I mean, there was an analog version and a digital version. Weren't there two?
There was a brown one and a kind of a cream white one. That's what I remember. And it, had all the keys and like little orange buttons and stuff. I don't know if there was an actual difference.
I think there were 2 different circuit boards they had in those, but they were basically the same thing. But there was an early model and a late model. But I'm definitely.
I think the early one was the brown one.
Yeah, I love the Omnichord. It's really special.
Well, speaking of gear, okay, wait. First, do you still own that DX7?
I do.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
It's got the problem that the first generation DXs have, where it sometimes doesn't receive MIDI. But the last time I used it, I had to play it manually and put it in my Emacs.
Oh, okay.
But I still have it.
Is that a chip burned out or a solder connection, or is that fixable?
It's probably a firmware thing that, needs to be addressed. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to decide whether or not to restore this keyboard. It came to us rather knackered.
I'm sorry, you've reached the maximum note count for this keyboard.
Oh yeah, I remember those messages.
The maximum event or whatever.
Event, yeah, 256 events.
Okay, so you still have that, which I think is really cool. Get it fixed. I think you'll find new old inspiration. And actually, I want to throw you back at you really quick.
Oh, the synthesizer thing. Yeah. Yes, the Space Ranger fighting the forces of entropy with synthesizers
Nope. The other one.
Oh, the other one is classic synth pop for the new century.
That one.
Yeah.
Get the DX7 fixed. You will find some classic synth sounds for the new century. So that's really cool. One of the guys we interviewed one time, he has was it the Op6 that is the Korg DX7 clone?
Those are delightful they're Arduino based machines, I think.
Okay.
There's Arduinos inside, which is why they have that boot up period.
Well, and that's what he was collecting at the time. He was trying to get all the kind of those miniature interesting Korgs that were coming out, because he goes, these are really cool. They're based on classic synths from other people, and they're not going to be around forever. So, but what would you get after the DX7?
My partner Jonathan at the time in our first group, he had a Jupiter 8 that somebody gave him because he had bought a D50, and that was the sound everybody wanted. So that Jupiter was junk. It didn't have MIDI. So I ended up with that eventually. But I think the first synthesizer I bought that wasn't a gift to me was an MKS50 Roland Alpha Juno black box module that I found. I purchased it out of the want ads in the newspaper. We would do pawn shop runs and stuff. And so eventually a PG300 slider box came out that would program it. So I stupidly sold that, but I have a keyboard version of that now. So, but yeah, I got the MKS stuff. I got a Roland Octopad. And our first sampler was the EPS from Ensoniq.
Yes.
So I was using Ensoniq, DX7, Kawai K1, MKS50, MKS80 showed up. I got a 70 as well. So I had a bunch of that stuff. And we did our first performances with racks. We got the SKB racks were brand new. So they were cheap.
They were affordable. SKB.
They were. So we'd fill them up, and we'd stuff my mom's Chevy van to the gills, and it would take us 45 minutes to set up. But we took our whole studio with us. We couldn't afford a multi-track, so we had one of the first Mackie 8-bus consoles that came out. There were 2 sent to Dallas, and we got one of them.
Nice.
We used to do this thing where we'd have to go buy a mixer out of a mail order catalog, go do a gig, and then return the mixer. We didn't have a way working for the longest time. I had this crazy little Vanco like broadcast mixer, and we'd have all these little RCA adapters like stacked on top of each other just to hear our sound, but you couldn't gig with that.
Right.
So, you know, in the old days, it was pretty strange. I had my dad's Super Scope cassette machine from '79, and it was the kind you'd hit the eject button, the tape would eject. It would like project like a projectile.
Launch out the
It was like a cannonball. It'd come across the room. But I would record on that, and I would bang out stuff on the piano, and I'd have my MMT8 running on the DX7. So I'd put like, you know, arpeggios and bass lines because it only had one sound at a time. So I could only have, you know, I could have as many tracks as I wanted, but only one sound. So I'd fill up my DX7 with patterns, and then I'd bang out the additional parts on the piano and record it on the cassette. And then I'd take it to my friend's house and said, can you like put this line in your K1? So we would do that. And eventually we all got computers, but, you know, multi-tracking wasn't easy in those days. I mean, it was possible. And the big thing in those black boxes of the 90s was the polyphony count. That was everything that people bragged about. You wanted, you know, 32, you know, MT32 had 32 voices. But the sound canvas had 64.
That's right.
Or you, when you got up to 128 and 256, now you were rolling. You were, you know, you were rolling in it if you had a JV 1010.
Well, and the thing about that was my sister has a podcast, and I gave her some music that I had recorded with U220 a long time ago, an MC300, and it's just really almost one sound. It's piano, and it's a couple chords that just kind of go back and forth, but really like arpeggiated. But here's the thing: is I have a sustain pedal down the whole time, so it takes no time to eat up 32 note polyphony on that, especially when you're going dun, 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 back and forth like that, and you can hear it drop off notes.
All the voice stealing. That's so cool.
All the voice stealing is happening, and every time I hear it play back, and she has it. I mean, you don't notice it unless you know it, and I know it. And so every time she opens her podcast or closes her podcast, I listen for that, and I'm like, notes being stolen, notes being stolen. Yes.
It's not a bug mic, it's a feature.
It's a feature. Now you want that. You want
now there's probably a plugin that simulates that.
Note stealing plugin, sure.
What you want is the Oberheim 4 voice.
Yes, I want this to sound like a 8 voice synth. Make it happen, and it'll start note stealing for you.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if the same thing happened to you as far as kind of your journey from through keyboards in the analog world into the digital world, where you think, okay, finally I can record things digitally. I'm getting all these keyboards in, and I'm getting them as clean as possible, and this is what I've been hoping to achieve all of these years. I'm finally doing the thing that I want to do. And then you hear it and you go, well, that's not that sounds very clean, almost too clean. How come it's not warm? And then you realize, oh, tubes and preamps and those sorts of things in the analog world are very important. And heck, maybe even playing through a cabinet or an amplifier and miking in a room or something like that is worth having synthesizers wired up that way instead of direct. Like, did you ever experience that?
I had those moments, but honestly, I'm old school enough that those moments were a long time in coming. People had to tell me there was something missing for me to realize, oh yeah, because in those days, tape noise was something that was your evil nemesis. You
didn't want it.
Your quest was to destroy that noise forever.
Sure.
So, you know, I didn't miss being a tape op. What I really didn't miss about tape was that Adam Smith synchronizer, getting it to synchronize your computer to the sync tone. I did not miss that. I don't miss syncing tape machines.
Yeah.
When I start using tape again, I'm not going to use. I mean, it's going to be, FSK. It's going to be fully analog. It's going to be simple or nothing. Because
Yes.
I don't miss those days at all. But yeah. But my first time experiencing Pro Tools was how should I say it? That was an earth-shaking moment for me. So it was a long time before I realized that digital audio had any sort of lack to it. Although
Right.
I would say now that these two technologies are pretty much at parity.
Well, because at the time,
I think so.
the idea of moving audio around like in a almost word processor sense, copy paste was just the pros of that were way outweighed the cons that we didn't even know about yet. The hiss and the warmth and all the things, the quantization errors and all those things that we later found out were the problems with digital audio. But at that time, it was just like, it was earth shattering for me as well. When was that? When was your first time with Pro Tools or DigiDesign or Studio 8 or whatever it was? Session 8.
I think it was 96 or 97 when I heard a Pro Tools demonstration in a music store that I later worked at. But it was somebody had put in a demo from Tears for Fears. It was off the Seeds of Love, and you could solo Phil Collins' drum kit. And
yes.
There were different takes from Phil Collins, and you could see it visually. And when I heard and saw that, I peed my pants. I left a little puddle on the floor. I had to leave.
I peed a little.
I did. A couple of years later, they were blowing out one of the Audio Media 3 like new bus cards with the software, and I jumped right on that.
Sure.
And when they added MIDI to it, was only an 8-track at that point, but when they made it 16 tracks and they added MIDI to the environment, and you didn't have to have one computer for MIDI and one for audio, that was the most productive period of my life. I mean, those years 2001 and 2002.
Yeah.
That's when most of the songs that I still perform were written in that period. That was my prolific Isopod period. But it was because of nonlinear audio.
Yeah.
Shortly after that, my card quit and I had to get a second system, and it didn't sound as good as the first one. So that's when I started asking questions about the audio quality. I mean, I love DAT machines. I could never afford one. But when I was a tape op, we were going from using analog tapes. We were multi-tracking in analog, and we were mixing through an analog console to a DAT machine, or even earlier than that, it was an F1 format. It was Sony's set-top box for VCRs.
Right. You used one of those.
Yeah. I did some transfers from F1 to DAT. Yeah. So they were you were writing to the entire VHS tape, to the video portion in audio. So yeah, I have the first CD that was ever produced. It's by Flim and the BBs. It's a jazz group from the Midwest, and they recorded on, I think, what later became the Sony Dash format. But their first demo cannot be played because they dismantled the prototype. But that CD was amazing. The dynamic range on that was just like, there's nothing wrong with that session.
Yeah.
It was a live band straight to 2 tracks.
Later, the dynamic range was limited for, let's say, data rate, compressive qualities. We can get more time on this. And then later, again, with the mini disc, where even mini disc, which I still have one, is
Me too.
coveted for some people, like recording to it, because it gives it synonymous like analog warmth. It knocks it down to something that doesn't sound as digital and cold. But do you know on that very first CD it sounds like the dynamic range had 0 restrictions. Do you know how long the format was? Like how much time you could get on an original disc if the dynamic range wasn't a limiting factor?
It wasn't disc based. This was tape.
Oh, it was tape.
These were still reel-to-reel machines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and they made a CD from that?
Well, so the
Glassmaster 1630 process.
Okay.
The limiting factor in those things were, and I think they pretty much just figured it out and decided to stick with it. It was always the analog to digital converter. And so like,
Yeah.
okay, well, how many samples per second are we doing? What is our bit depth? And they, for some reason, the 16-bit stereo 44.1, actually, I know the reason. It had everything to do with videotape, actually. And the reason it's like such a weird 44.1 kilohertz is because it was different for black and white videotape that ran at actual 30 frames per second instead of 29.97. And so when they went to 29.97, that's when the 44.1 came into play. Anyway, that was the whole deal, is because it's so much information. There was no way they could have a hard drive. There was no way they had any way of physically storing it, except for videotape recorders had come along. And so they turned that, and it's what you were alluding to. They turned that audio, that digital audio, into a video stream, and it's fun to watch. You can just pop those tapes into a VHS, and it's just a bunch of, it looks a lot like Yar's Revenge. You remember that Atari game? Whenever the thing going up, it looks like about 4 or 5 of those things going up in on gray, and then but that was just encoded digital audio. And yeah, that was the synchronicity of it all had to do with, here's 29.97 frames per second going, do with it what you will.
Reasons of SMPTE, or Philips having the upper hand politically.
Yeah.
All sorts of American technology is strange, and it's and sometimes the consumer decides, like the Super VHS was probably better looking than a lot of Blu-ray releases, but still you're not going to see that because only about 40 titles were made. Nobody's going to invest in that now, except maybe you and I would go out and buy one. But
well, I've done some transfers from old Betamax, and those things are just superior. I heard about it back in the day, but
they are.
I'd never really seen it, and it's just it's practically broadcast quality. And you throw it next to a VHS machine, and if you had side by side those, if they were that way in the 80s where you could see the difference, I think it would have been like no contest. But the fact, I'm still not even sure why exactly VHS won and Betamax lost.
I think it's because Sony would refuse to license.
Yeah, was that it?
And so they just did an end around.
Yeah.
I think they used their budget on promoting the format, and they used a prototype format without improving it.
Yeah.
But
oh wait, no, I do remember. I do recall. It was time. So VHS could very easily do the 2 hour, 4 hour, 6, and even 8.
The SLP,
which can record a whole football game.
And a Betamax could only do like 3
and the Betamax
or
could not. That's what
3 at the most or something.
That was the Achilles. I remember now. Yeah,
that makes sense. Well, at least VHS gave us ADAT for a while. We needed that.
And tell me about that. Did you ever use an ADAT machine?
I was there during that transition. I was no longer a tape op, or I was no longer an intern at that point. I was hired by my mentor for a year to do some things, and transfers were part of that. So we wanted to sell the old JH24 that I had spent so much time under with a screwdriver, getting ready for the session.
Yes.
So I was transferring JH24 to ADAT.
Okay.
Yeah. So and then shortly after that, the D8B came along. Mackey's digital mixer came along, and then we started to see the nonlinear hard drive stuff happen.
You said you were a tape op, and it was not just at this church, or were you working in a studio, or was this at the church?
Yeah, I did some commercial studios. The church gig kind of led me into the internship.
Okay.
I was offered that, and I did my senior year of high school. I did it homeschooled so that I could go to the studio in the afternoons and learn this. So yeah, we had a wonderful complex. It was called Summit Burnett. He was like a Grand Ole Opry kind of guy. So he was a talent manager, but he had a studio for a while. and they built it in the old Bill Putnam style. There was a full-sized orchestra room. There were plaques from rock bands on the walls and stuff, and then they had several suites upstairs, and we rented one of those. But sometimes I would book time in Studio B to do some what we call sweetening transfers. We'd take our DAT mix or our reel-to-reel mix, and if there was something we didn't like about it because our speakers were on the ceiling and we couldn't hear, there wasn't a bass line loud enough or something, I would take the sync tone and I'd resequence the bass line and mix it to another tape. But I put the whole mix through a BBE Sonic Maximizer to like make it brighter because tapes would lose a lot of high end.
Oh, the
So we did stuff
BBE
like
Sonic Maximizer. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'd forgotten about the first time I ran into one of those.
Sounds like a Marvin the Martian weapon.
It is.
It was.
Yeah. It was such a like black magic happens in this box, and I could not tell you what exactly it did, except that there was a button that you pushed and it made things sound better. That your lower end was tighter, your high end was better. Everything about it was just. Can you tell me what it was doing?
I think it was synthesizing upper order harmonics based on the signal that was there, and it probably had some kind of phase artifacts too. So you wanted to be careful not to put too much. I never used more than 2 clicks of that, but some people were like big time. I think Trevor Horn was the guy who would like just crank his highs when he recorded to the tape machine, so it would come back not needing equalization. I just didn't know that trick.
Right.
So I went to so BBE was my thing.
Yes.
That's how this was recorded through the BBE. And I think I recorded this on what? Go ahead.
What kind of music is on that tape?
This is like a digital 80s synth pop kind of a thing. Isopod's more of an analog purist kind of a thing, more of a Vince Clarke inspired retro synth pop. But this was like, M1, TX81Z, K1. There was a little Jupiter 8 in there. I had mandolins and saxophones on it, and it was vocal music. So it was basically, we ripped off things like Con-Can and this was from the late 80s era where everyone was trying to make the biggest snare drums.
Layer it, fatten it, layer it, fatten it.
I know the answer to the question, but I want to ask it anyway, just so that I'm not assuming. It sounds like we were listening to some of your music before we came on the show here, and your stuff is really well produced. It's really well mixed and really well mastered. And it sounds like you are the guy that does both of those things. Are you taking these songs or these albums to other people to mix and master, or are you doing everything?
It's all me. But but I did this having interned for people and having gone to college and having taken courses and having worked in commercial studios too. So, it took me a long time to get to that point. Once Pro Tools came along, it was easier. But at that point, I really started to read the internet and read interviews and read white papers on the Nyquist theorem and stuff like that to try to figure out how to get better bass response out of an early Pro Tools rig. So this represents a lot of work tracking, and it turns out that the converters on those cards were really pretty good because they really hold up on my I'm talking to you through this right now. One of the best pieces of equipment I've ever purchased.
They're good.
One of the best investments I've ever made. But my early Pro Tools stuff, it actually translates well. So Robbie Ryan's telling me to retrack everything now that you have an Apollo. It's like, why? The converters were good to begin with.
Yeah.
The original. See, I'm a fan of early iterations of technology because the specifications for the format were specified from the outset. And so the first one is going to be good. Your prototype's going to be good. Later on, capitalism can only give you something faster, cheaper, better.
Yeah.
But it's cheaper. But I like those synths too because they have more features.
Right.
So, nothing's better than a Juno 60, but the Alpha Juno can do more. It's got more waveforms. So to answer your question is it's all me now. It wasn't at first.
Right.
It wasn't at first. I got a lot of help.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
It was a struggle. because I heard things I didn't like, and it's like, how do I make this sound better? So this CD has been mixed several times. At the 20th anniversary re-release of the first Isopod CD is about to drop.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, it's on cassette.
I was about to ask you, where can we get that? You had, you had the 2 albums and a couple singles on Spotify. You had 5 singles on Bandcamp. You had, I think there were 2 singles on YouTube, but I don't know if they were also available somewhere else. Like, okay, so this is about to drop. How old is the oldest track on this new release?
2000.
Okay.
The first song I wrote ended up on a plastic music compilation in 2002. And when I did my touring during the MySpace days, when I did my touring, I wouldn't say that single got me more gigs or got me paid more, and it certainly didn't make me popular, but everywhere I played, somebody knew me from that compilation.
Okay.
Yeah, the plastic music compilation really helped, and that single is on this release, and I'm dropping. Yeah.
And when is that coming out?
That is coming out end of the year.
Okay, so into 2024. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of the 20-year marker of when I released this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any new tracks on there?
No, this is pretty much my interpretation of what this would have been as an album. This is an EP with 7 tracks on it, and the new one's going to be an album.
Got it. Okay.
I'm releasing it on the new National Audio Company Super Ferric Studio Masters $7.99. Some people don't like it, but I spoke to them at National Audio Company, and they said this is not going to be as good as Chrome tapes, but we're going to get it as close as we can. Come around October, you can have an analog master of this release, made straight from my Apollo. I'm going to make them one by one in real time, special edition.
You said that it was kind of a pain point going through and learning how to, figure out the problems of doing things yourself, the mixing and the mastering process, which means that you listen to your own music over and over and over and over again. But do you still find like the stuff that you've released, is it in your playlist, and do you still like to listen to it, your own stuff? And if so, what's your favorite song?
I do not have an organized playlist because Apple, thank you very much, just cannot develop their own software. I mean, they killed iTunes. Yes. And every once in a while, it just dumps everything that I have.
Right.
So everything that I own is across several hard drives, which is why I like CDs.
Right.
And I like cassettes and vinyl. I like physical media because, number one, you know where it is physically. If you can clean your room, you know where your stuff is. and secondly, it forces you to sit down and listen to it.
Sure.
I mean, I don't worry too much about, things like spatial audio. I think Dolby Atmos is going to fail for the same reason that 5.1 did, because people are listening on this. That is your output medium. And you know what? That's okay. That's not wrong. There's nothing wrong with how you want to listen to music.
I'm only laughing because it is my job to install surround sound mix stages for UT Austin. And one of the next big things that we're building is an Atmos mix stage.
I don't get me wrong. I love surround. I love that, and I would love to come hear that. You'll have to give me the tour when it's done.
Absolutely.
Because I love that stuff. I used to go to San Francisco. They had a 6-speaker surround system. Yeah. And back in those days, you would perform surround music by using an 8-bus console, and you would manually pan things.
Yes.
So, and that guy is working in this place called, guy was doing that. He's working at Infinite Power Studios now, and he's remixing the Ricky records and all the stuff on Dice Records. He's mixing all that. Did I pronounce that right? I think I did. All that industrial stuff. He's got a synclavier. I met that dude in the early days, and he kind of went through that same process that I do. I just don't have a $24,000 neat console. I have a 40 input Soundcraft that somebody gave me that was in their garage. They wanted to get rid of it. So hi Coy, how you doing? It's so big though it doesn't fit in my room. So I'm actually thinking I'm going to put it in a picture frame and mount it in the stairwell.
I will tell you the Soundcrafts. My first real album that I ever recorded was through a Soundcraft studio, and it was kind of a light blue looking whatever. But
Was it Delta? The light
I don't
blue
know.
ones were, yeah, there were a few blue ones.
Yeah, but I
Mm.
will tell you the EQs. Everybody kept saying, "Yeah, British EQ on Soundcraft stuff's good." It's true. I can make drums sound amazing through those guys.
Oh yeah, that wide bell curve, that
Mm-hmm.
nice
Yeah.
saturated fuzzy. Yeah, I cut my teeth on a TAC Scorpion, and that had like Neve design preamps in it. But I liked the EQ on those too. It
Yeah.
just had a really nice low end that some of the new consoles don't have.
Yeah.
But Soundcrafts I always thought were a bit they were kind of murky sounding to my ears, and the JH, the Sonys were kind of harsh in the mid range, but they were all good. They were all really high end sounding consoles.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, some of them got old. You get one in the college and it was kind of falling apart. It started to sound a little wonky, but you always had somebody with a soldering iron in there to change
That's
out
right.
the chips and stuff. So, but yeah, so you recorded through Soundcraft. Were you mixing to tape at that time, or were you going digital, or
ADATs. Yeah.
ADATs?
So
Okay, yeah, yeah. So hybrid as well. I don't think we would be where we're at without digital technology.
I am so sure that the reason that we have home studios now is because Alesis came out with the ADAT. That was the thing that took it to the masses, I feel like.
Well, it made other people answer, and then to your point, now it's better, cheaper, faster type thing, and it kind of came down, and somebody's like, well, we're going to put this out, and somebody's like, well, crap, we're going to have to put this out.
So that makes me the thing that I liked about the ADATs is the multiple channels, and so eventually I was able to get those multiple channels into my computer, into my DAW, and I noticed you have an Apollo. With what you're doing, are you doing more than 2 or 4 or 6 channels in and out, or are you just basically, we'll take the left right out of this keyboard and then we'll come back, and because everything is MIDI, and we'll patch in the next set of keyboards and patch in the next, and you're just overdubbing? What is your process?
That depends on how organized I am in any particular dwelling.
Yeah.
I've moved studio 19 times, which is exhausting, which is why
Yes.
I'm building this place, because
Right.
I'm now gonna leave my hardware in one place, and wherever I go in the world, I'm gonna go in the box, or I'm
Right.
gonna take just a few choice pieces with me, because we're at that point now that I think, it pays to be, to travel light.
That was my next question. Was there's a big kind of debate, like, do you use virtual synths, or do you use just the purest, like, we're going to go old school, and it needs to be hardware, and it sounds like you're okay with virtual.
Well, actually, the reason I don't do a lot of virtual is because I've always been a low-end Mac guy. If I can make the computer choke, I don't want to do it that way.
Yeah.
Why I still have a lot of hardware.
Right.
I've always had the cheapest Mac that I could pay cash for. Half the time, that was paid for by somebody else, like a city bus ran over my car, and that's how I got the Apollo, because I fixed the car myself and used the leftover funds for which they don't like it when you do stuff like that.
But it sounds like you have a pragmatic approach to it, though. Whereas, if you are going on the road for weeks or months, you're going to be fine with a laptop, because at least you can compose stuff, get some ideas down, and maybe take a small piece of manageable hardware with you if you want it, and you could perform something in that realm, but you can always come home and redo that song on the big hardware.
Well, it beats taking your studio out on the road, and I've done that. I played a festival once where they kicked us off stage after 2 songs because it took us too long to set up.
Yeah.
So I don't mind, I'm not going to go all the way to, my set is, DJ on a USB stick. But my setup right now is a Moog synthesizer, which I play counter melodies on while I'm singing. Playing 88 notes and singing at the same time, not for me. But I have enough coordination to play a monosynth, sing, and then use an analog delay at the same time. So that's my rig. My drummer uses a Nord drum, and then I have somebody on, last it was a sequential multi-track, but I might use the DeepMind this time. Something I can put on a cymbal stand and not take with me full size. So that's, we've been DAW-less for a long time because I don't have a lot of tolerance for screw ups. And I had a Mac fail on me once in the MIDI days, and so I got a new computer. And then I had Pro Tools didn't boot once, and so I got rid of that Mac, and then I went to like media players, or reel-to-reel or anything. There was a time I was using reel-to-reel again just for fun because I had one.
Oh,
but
that seems like a nightmare.
It's a cool stage prop.
Well, yeah, those are fun. Yeah, I actually, buddy of mine, Tim Koza from California, he's one of those guys I met out on tour. He gave me this Tascam 32, which I took to the airport and promptly dropped. So I broke it before I ever got to use it.
Yeah.
He worked in radio, and he found these things in storage bins, and the stations were like, back
Get them out of
get
here.
rid of, get it. So I had this, and it was a brown one. But what could I do with it? So I painted it white, and I used it on a flyer. And then when he came to town, I spooled tape off of it, and I tied him up with it. Because I'm a nerd. You put the tape in spool mode, and when you're editing, and it just spills out. So I just made a mount of tape
shooting it out.
Yeah, just started, lassoing people with it. So that's how I use tape machines these days. But no, I'm practical because I just don't like to lift things anymore. I had my days doing rock and roll stuff. I did arena shows and flew line arrays and stuff and loaded trucks.
Right. And it's just after a while you realize I'm not young anymore and I like my back.
Well, I think you also back then you thought that if you weren't doing that, you weren't legit.
Yeah.
In some aspect. And now you're like, I don't care. I'm going to do what's easiest for me and still makes the show work.
But then it's, seeing Front 242 today is not like seeing them in the early days. So sometimes I'm like, Vince Clarke, could you please just bring one real synthesizer on stage with you?
Yeah, I think that I
bring
get
an
you
Odyssey
there.
or something, I mean, I want to see something.
I'm torn on that because him with a freaking collapsible Razor stand and a MacBook is just not doing it for me.
It works. It certainly does. But then, he's a very practical guy. Nobody's worked harder on analog signal flow than Vince
but
Clarke.
we know he has the gear. Put a huge modular behind you, dude. Go over there and tweak it every once in a while.
Or even a small one.
The crowd will go nuts.
You touch a real synth, I guarantee you people will scream.
And it's also, it's not unheard of when we've talked about this. You've seen drummers bring their giant drum sets with them. Like, it takes forever to set those up and mic those. Like, come on, just let's plug in some things. I'm with you here.
Yeah. You did mention your singing. I wanted to ask you about that because on I think it was a dance music album, I think there were 4 or 5 tracks where there's vocals. And I'm going, I wonder if this is him or if this is somebody he brought in for this or what. So is that you singing?
It's me. I do bring another vocalist.
Okay.
But I sing lead most of the time.
Okay. And then I swear on a couple tracks that I'm hearing what to me sounds like actual guitar.
Isopod is a solo songwriting project, but we've had about 20 people come through the group.
Got it.
So because it's today you're a band or you're a composer working at home. It's not like people are selling albums. So we get asked to play a lot, and that was something that we used to have to fight for in the early days. Like, I can say that hitting the 20-year mark is something I didn't think would happen. But it's nice being asked to do things. I mean, I'm not pounding the pavement for my gigs right now. People are coming to ask me. So we've had a decent second run. We're into our 3rd run of shows. Post-pandemic, it's it's a little bit different, and people acknowledge that we need a bit more support to keep going. So that's to everyone who supports us that and pays us for the gigs that we do. We didn't always get paid. It's really nice. I can say that even though big tech has pretty much demonetized music, and it's really hard to survive doing this because at this point you shouldn't be doing it on spec, but the fact that I'm able to share it with people, get it to them quickly, and people listen and people show up, that's about as much as I could ask for.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I know we kind of touched on this, but like big picture, what's next for you?
Big picture is to focus on the small details.
I mean, you're building a new
Yeah.
studio. We've kind of
Mhm.
established that, but how did that come about? Sounds like you're just saying, I want a place for this stuff to be. That's always this and that. I've moved enough,
Mhm.
and so that's happening. When is that going to be done?
Well, I've got about 3 generations of the family's money in it, and I'm still running out of money. So it's a work in progress, but I've already done some of my best work in this particular room. I
Okay.
just did it with plywood and drywall and no furnishings. Now it's going to have proper air conditioning. It's going to have proper acoustics. I really like it because I don't know if you can see, it's a barn-like building. So I don't have parallel walls in here, so I don't have to deal with flutter echo. So I get really good results. So my goal is to get this done and to finish the things that I started. I keep threatening to quit. I would like to finish my Isopod albums, release them all, give them a proper release, so that I can retire. But people keep asking me to do things, and that's not a bad problem to have. I thought of getting into, I thought of getting into voiceover, but I think AI is pretty much killed that for me. But
AI is doing a lot of things.
maybe I'll mix through my Soundcraft. You got a rock record you need to have mixed? I could do that. I can help you track synths. If you've always wanted to track on a Jupiter 8, send me your MIDI. I'll track it for you, that sort of thing. You want to do analog layback? I may do that. So, I can do a number of services out of this space, but it is a personal project studio. The big picture would be just to finish properly the things that I've started. And then maybe I can focus on my personal life a little bit.
I completely understand that. We kind of mentioned it a little bit. You said you were using Logic now. Is this your main workstation software?
Yeah, I've got native instruments, but again, I'm a low end Mac guy, so I don't use it for everything. It kind of falls down on the job using a low end Mac. So I'm still working in standard resolution when I do video, but I've got 5 different concerts in multi-camera footage that I haven't released yet. Oh, here's something. This was the Isopod DVD that I put out.
Nice.
I want to say that was 2007. So I'm going to do some live concerts. I'm going to release them in some sort of form. I'm probably going to go physical because it's hard to get people to watch YouTube. I mean, what's the point? The retention rate is like 3 minutes. So maybe I'll put it on a paid tier on Vimeo and then make a DVD for people who really care enough to pick one up. And usually these, I've not had good luck with online stores. I have a few people that interview me, and that helps a little bit for just audience exposure. But I sell things at point of purchase at performances. People hear you, they want to pick up the T-shirt or the recording. So my goal is to just get out there and do that, do some final tours in support of the records, and then we'll see what's next. I'm starting to see the benefits of collaborating with others, which is, I've never been the biggest collaborator, but I know a lot of talented people, and I would say that's the best part of having worked in music for a quarter century is just the people I've met along the way. If I can make a difference in 3 people's lives, I mean, I've done it for 2 people, maybe there's one more.
Well, and there's value in not just collaborating for having more variety on your album, but the networking aspect. When we did our very first album, I was like, no, we're going to mix it and we're going to master it. It's all going to be us. And I didn't realize how much I might have been shooting us in the foot, because had we had somebody else, mix it that was in the industry, then they would have said, oh, hey, I'm working on this project. Have you heard it? And then also getting it out even further, when we were no names, the mastering, oh yeah, I'm mastering this project.
Yeah.
These guys are pretty good. Have you heard them? The idea that getting other people to help you with stuff actually promotes you as well. So
Yeah. The community aspect, I think, is really helpful. But I'm the older I get, the more I'm kind of seeing that as an end in itself. I mean, it's actually the best part. We've
Yeah.
had a really nice creative renaissance here since about 2014 in Dallas. I didn't think it was going to happen. Dallas was a rock and roll town. They didn't care about us. They only cared about things that were big. People only go to big shows. But no, really, there's been a really wonderful underground renaissance in Texas
Hmm.
for the synthesizer community and for people who just weirdos who want to do, who want to express themselves.
Cool.
Where's your next show? You talked about playing some shows coming up.
Presenting a little bit of music at the Vintage Computer Festival in June.
I don't know what that is, but it sounds fun.
Yeah, I want to go.
I was like, what?
This is a big convention for people who just like old computers. And they had one in California, and now they're bringing it to the Southwest. And it happens to be here in Dallas. And Robbie said, "Hey, I'm going to perform here. You want to come present some material?" And I said, "Sure. Do you have a ticket to that event? I'll sing for you." And we're playing Super Happy Funland. This is a venue that I've wanted to play at since the MySpace days. I was always jealous of people who got to play there.
That's so funny. I thought I had made up that space when my daughter was 3 or 4 years old. I needed to often go to Fry's Electronics, and I was kind of a single
Just call
dad
it
at the
Super-
time. And she, "Where are we going, Dad?" And I said, "Well, we're going to Super Happy Funland." And this works all the time until one time, I guess I'd worn it out and I'd been there too much and taken her with me too much. She said, "Well, we're going to Super Happy Funland." She's, "I don't want to go to Super Happy Funland."
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Oh yeah, we're playing.
We're going to sub unhappy bad land.
I always thought it was funny that Fry's was kind of had the kind of corral kind of theme in
Mhm.
it, because I felt like I was a cow going to slaughter.
Well, you are, so
And being good chattel property.
that's right.
Oh.
Well, the one in Irving or wherever that was, I guess there was one in Garland. There was a couple up
Yeah,
there,
big one in Garland. Yeah.
but the one in, was it Houston or Austin? It was all, I think it was Houston. It was all space themed, like NASA. They were all
Oh,
different.
that was cool. Oh, you're
Yeah.
right. They did have one of those.
Because they had all these like satellite dishes and rocket ships out front. And weird.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh yeah, we're playing an arcade as well.
Ooh,
We're playing Electric Starship Arcade in Haltom City.
Alton
for-
City.
People in the mid cities of the DFW area, if you want to come see us, we're opening for Vic 20.
Cool.
Yeah, he's doing a synthwave thing, which is really fun. I like the synthwave music. It's like these kids weren't around in the 80s, but they're inspired by it, kind of like we used to
Yeah.
like 1940s noir.
Vic
like it.
20.
I like
What
it.
a cool name.
Yeah. He's a good
we
friend.
all get it.
Yeah. Like, who? That's pretty.
Here's my 20 with my my tape storage drive.
Yeah. Exactly.
My SideQuest 44 megabyte.
I'm gonna load this program. I'm gonna go make a half gallon of Kool-Aid, and I'll be back, and it may be loaded.
Yeah. That's funny you say you're opening or you're playing at an arcade. There is a YouTube guy that I follow, the 8-bit guy, and he does a bunch of restoration of VIC 20s and Commodores and talks about lots of anyway, he bought an arcade up there, I think in Bedford. So I was starting to get really excited if you were going to be playing at his arcade
at his
opening or
place.
something. Yeah,
I
that
haven't.
would be cool.
Where's there an arcade in Bedford?
I don't know. I think that's what he said. I'm pretty sure that's where he's opening.
It's got to be
Is-
on Bedford Road, like going towards Hearst or somewhere. I'm trying to think of
Yeah.
where in that town you would put one.
I don't
Okay.
know. I
Cool.
don't know.
I would like to know about that. I met the 8-bit guy at the DFW Synth Heads meet. Shout out to Brandon McCorder. He's you know that community, right? Brandon heads that up, and he has a very large synthesizer collector. He's currently playing drums for Isopod.
That's cool.
Okay.
That's
But
cool.
yeah, and the 8-bit guy, I met him. I played in my Prophet 5, and I turned the volume up way too loud. We couldn't get sound out of it, and so I just blew his ears out. He threw my headphones down on top, and so I got one little dent in my Prophet 5 from the 8-bit guy. I felt so bad for him.
Yeah.
You don't get your hearing back.
Nah,
So
I know.
I thought about changing out that badge, but it's like, no, I'm going to keep it. It's a battle scar.
Yeah. From the 8-bit guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh,
I should get him to sign it.
Yeah.
I should get the 8-bit to sign my Prophet 5. I got Bernie Worrell's signature on my source. I'm really excited to have that because he's no longer with us. Yeah.
who just died? Was it Dave Smith or Bob Moog?
Yeah, Dave just passed. Yeah,
Okay.
a little bit ago. Yeah, and Fletch.
All right, guys, get ready for this. It is called Time Rift Arcade,
Haha.
and it says opening
That sounds right.
2024, so not open yet. But
Right.
here's
Okay.
where it is. It is at the northwest corner of Harwood and Central Drive in the Kroger Shopping Center.
Oh, like where the CC's is or was. Okay.
The
That
CC
one.
The CC's is on the far left. This is
Yeah.
on the far right.
Okay.
Oh wow.
So if you're looking at Kroger, it's on the far right. All the machines are free because
Yeah.
you've paid the cover.
Yeah.
And then, but they also have a, kitchen and a full bar and all the rest of
Yeah.
it. So
We
it's-
have one of those down here in Austin. It's called Cidercade, but yeah, those
okay.
I love going there. It's great. So,
100 classic and modern arcade games,
That's going to be awesome.
pinball.
I approve.
All right.
100%. Unless Mike, you have some more questions. Do you have any questions for us?
Yeah. I mean, what's possessed you to talk for hours at a time with other nerds, and then to put out a series?
I think you just said it. we're tired of our families saying that's not interesting to me.
Exactly.
The brief history of this was Mike and I knew each other growing up. Didn't really hang out, but we knew each other, and we knew that we were both into synths and sequencing and things like that. And long story short, he's been in the Austin area since college, and I moved down here a number of years ago, and we reconnected to where we're seeing each other, and hanging out on a regular basis, maybe a year and a half ago. And we were meeting for lunch one day, and he said, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. And I just said, yes.
Didn't even know what it's about. I'll do
Didn't
it.
care.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was there.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
that's all we talked about when we
Yeah.
were just hanging out anyway. And he told me, and I said, okay, I'm definitely in then.
Yeah.
And that's where it is. And the first couple were us just almost interviewing each other because we didn't know each other's history in this as detailed as we would like. And then we got to a point where we said, let's start talking to other people. And so we did. And then we asked of them, what I'm going to ask of you is try to think of somebody that you think we should talk to next. Facilitate us getting in touch with them, and you're not the first. And it was a little scary the first time we interviewed somebody that neither of us knew, because we started with people we knew. And we were like, hey, do you know somebody? Or somebody would say, yes, we know somebody. And it was a little scary. And now I think it's great because the stories are so different, but they're so similar. You know, that there's high points of like, well, this happened and Dad took me to Radio Shack, and you mentioned something today that we were both laughing at. And the reason we were laughing at it was because you're not the first person to buy a mixer for a gig, use it, and return it.
Yes. Renting.
You did what you had to in those days. I mean,
Absolutely.
Rent to gig.
we had a Crown 300 amplifier that would set the speakers on fire.
Yes.
And you know,
If it did that at the last 10 seconds of the last song, then perfect.
Yeah.
It was perfect. Yeah. All you had to do is turn it up during the, when you go into the vamp, just crank it a little bit more. It should, start to see the magic smoke at the end. It'd be like a death rock show.
The magic
Wow.
smoke.
Was that a problem with the speakers? Because I like Crown amps.
Crown amps had some issues. These were homemade speakers though, with no fuses.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna blame the speakers.
Another question I have for the other mic.
Okay.
Portland or Austin? Who was weird first?
Ooh. I mean, I'm gonna
stand back, and I actually know the answer to this, but I'm gonna let him answer.
Oh, then if you know the answer, I'm gonna say Austin, just because I've been here a long time, and I feel like I've heard somebody say that they kind of stole our thunder. But what is it, Nimix?
As far as the moniker, keep Austin weird and keep Portland weird, Austin was first, but Portland was probably weird before Austin was weird, if that makes sense. So there's my not pissing both sides off answer, but as far as the keep Portland weird, they stole it from Austin.
Austin had the bumper sticker first.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. That satisfies me.
Okay.
I lived in Portland for a little while, so
Okay.
but I'm not anti-Austin by any means. I traveled to Austin, and immediately everyone's friendlier. I hear Dallas.
I would say before the last 10 years, they were very similar cities. They were very, it was kind of like multiverse versions of each other, where they're decently sized towns on a hill with a big university going down to a river. And they had a similar vibe, music scenes. They had North by Northwest, a music festival. Austin had South by Southwest. It was just a little synergy kind of happening there. So
I want to try and answer your first question and like why we do this, and I think I'm kind of figuring it out as we go. It's for those moments that we had with you earlier, where I figured out that we had that shared experience when we were younger with the AV, that we were both basically in AV clubs, right? When we were in elementary school, and that was part of who I am. So the answer is to kind of figure out who I am. And so by doing these interviews, it sort of helps me do that. So I think that may be the same with the other mic too.
yeah, it is. It's cathartic. I mean, it brings up things I haven't thought about, and it helps me in a sense of my musical and technological journey, as far as kind of uncovering and remembering where I've been. I'm in a spot where I didn't touch this stuff for 15 years. I want to get back into it. I'm building a new place, and part of that is I have a lot of hardware. I was in the box after hardware, and I'm kind of want to do a hybrid thing. Other aspects of my life would give me the freedom to do that now. I'm not in high school and having to go to Chili's to work for 8 hours and then do schoolwork, all this stuff, and being pissed off that that's impeding my composition time.
Right.
It's kind of like, okay, what could I do with the same gear now?
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about that. And this is as part of that journey, is kind of remembering and reflecting, and it's really fun to see other people that had similar broad stroke journeys, and that they're still doing it. And I totally get with the Isopod thing, where you're like, I want to finish this old stuff and get it out there properly, and then it'll be a line in the sand. I won't have any projects sitting on the shelf, and then I want to see what can happen at that point, because I don't want to plan.
That's
and I'm
right.
right there with you. So that being said, do you have an old copy of Cubase? I'm trying to transfer some damn ALL files and get them into the newer format.
My Cubase isn't that old.
Okay.
Yeah, I was looking at some early Steinberg software. Espen Kraft was showing it. It's the really early stuff, the Commodore stuff.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me. Do you have any music up that you like to share? Do you have links to that?
I have an album on Spotify I can send you that.
Yeah, by all means, I'd like to hear it.
And I think it's 100% in the box stuff. I think it was all done with Reason. But yeah,
if I had started 10 years later, I'd be using Reason. I'd be a Reason guy, because it was fantastic. But
well, and now I haven't done it yet, but the guy I used to compose with, he's doing stuff now, and he's totally in the box, because he has a kid, and he's just like, dude, I can't deal with all this stuff. He goes, I just want to be able to pull out my laptop anytime. And so he's very much against that. But we were doing kind of dance, EDM live PAs at the time. So we recruited a female vocalist to come in and do this stuff. but that's the album that's up there. So my personal stuff, I mean, I took class in college called Sonic Design, and that's when I was introduced to Pierre and Ray and all this stuff. And I've got crazy granular synthesis on a Next computer, 17-minute analog craziness pieces out there, and that's not published, you know. I want to get all this stuff back, and then I really want to throw it out properly and draw a line in the sand and see what I want to do next.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, Mike, how about you? You got some audio?
I have a bunch again. I've a bunch of unfinished projects, but the first two albums of my first band are up on Spotify, and we can send you those links.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll send you my links. I'm going to pretty much put out the news about Isopod 1. I'm putting out 4 albums, and they all have the same name. I mean, I guess I got that idea from Peter Gabriel. It's just going to be Isopod, and the second album is going to be Isopod. Third album, Isopod. So there's just nothing else to call it. So I'm putting out 4 of those, and I'll put out news about that on my Instagram, which is at Isopod Labs.
Cool.
I'm Isopod on Facebook, so it's easy to find. I'll share links with you so you can see how things are shaping up.
Well, we really enjoyed having you on the show. Thank you so much for doing this with us, and we appreciate your time.
And I hope to see you live. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, same
Yeah,
here.
this was a pleasure, Mike. You're always welcome to come out.
Cool.
Yeah, I think we're stopping in Austin in a few days.
Let us know.
Yeah, Are you playing in Austin?
Well, we're doing Super Happy Funland, and then there's this venue called Invisible Stereo, where we're going to check out afterwards in Austin. Really cool setup. It's like the whole wall is projection. They've got some vintage JBLs.
I'm looking it up.
Yeah, it's a really great venue. Like it's a place that I think you'd fit right in. So we're going to go check it out, and why don't you come hang out with us?
I would love to do that. Love to do that.
Yeah. So yeah, come see us.
Definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, I got other things going on, so I got to get out of here. But thanks again. We'll see you soon.
Sounds good, Mike. Yeah.
Thanks, Brent.
Have a lovely
Andre
afternoon.
the Brent. See ya.
Bye.
Mike's on mics, yeah.